to top chat. Instead of all chat, we've got Yasa, Believe in Yourself, good to see you. We've got the J-Vlog, Tokyo 503, Bold Bullets Boy, I Got the Snacks, Tuwaiwai, good to see you, and yes, welcome. Don't have a lot of topics tonight, so as always, you can give me topics by just putting a little @ Hiko Simon in the comments. It will highlight up to me, and I will be able to see in the side there and answer. But otherwise, yeah, I'm going to jump in. Someone mentioned in the comments last week, Disgruntled Doomer mentioned that there was a buzzing noise in the background. That was probably the heater. It's been getting a bit cold, and I've got windows all around me here, so it does get a little bit cold, and I may turn it on. Quint Rankin, boom, good to see you. However, I've got them off for now. If you still hear a noise, and I guess it is there, it's that they've got the computer going and it's a little bit nearby. That's always going to be there on this. I use like the iPhone or the iPad for this. No, so this is as good as the sound will get for now. I could try investing in more. Been looking at mics and stuff tonight, but for now, that is me. And not a lot of news, I guess. I've been trying to think, what have I been watching this week? Watched a few videos on, I've been catching up on a lot of YouTube videos lately. So a great video on the future of work and artificial intelligence and how automation will change everything. But Dave O'Hunter, good to see you. Mr. Cordychep, there is news is coming, but not a lot of topics. So yes, as always, I'm always open to topics that you guys want me to talk about, and I might do a wee tune at the end if we're feeling in the mood. So yes, let's jump in and see what we have. The first one is, this is kind of cool. This was taking Yokohama, the 29th local government to offer same-sex partnership certificates, which apparently is indeed Japan's largest municipality. That brings the percentage of people with access to such certificates in Japan from 14.6% to 17.5% across Japan. You can see a map there. I didn't actually realize it appears that all of Ibaraki Prefecture does that. So that is that's prefecture level. Still is mostly municipalities within Tokyo rather than the entire prefecture. But you can see it's kind of good to see at least it's getting sort of normalized. La Migra. But yes, Channel Ralph, good to see you. Merry Christmas indeed, good to see you. Mr. Cordychep, the state of butter. Don't get me started. Odie Jr., boom, good to see you, Odie. Good to see everybody. I can't even read what that is. That's like little tables or or something there. But anyway, kind of a no-brainer if you ask me. I mean, they don't get full legal rights the same as being fully sort of married, but it does help for different purposes like getting insurance and other purposes for places that recognize it. And it sounds like Mr. Cordychep, Israel Folau. For those who don't know, he's an Australian rugby player who's deeply from both. His father's a pastor, and he's from a very religious Samoan family, and he started tweeting that all LGBT people are going to hell and they're responsible for the forest fires and whatnot, which was disappointing. But yes, Behringer, new sound is off. I don't know what that means, but new sounds is, hopefully you can all hear me okay anyway. And that is the thing that is happening in Japan, slowly but surely. I made a comment about this, but so Yukio Hatoyama, the first DPJ Prime Minister, the second leader of an opposition party to take down the LDP in 70 years, was this guy, which was really a sign of how fed up everyone was with Taro Aso, who's currently the Deputy Prime Minister, and how bad his administration was going. He came in basically with a Democratic Party that was kind of, it was a tied together of former LDP people, so basically malcontents from the LDP, who had gone, you know what, I'm just going to adjust the level a little bit here so it doesn't peak out so often. There we go, that's better. From the LDP, there were former socialists, there were basically a whole bunch of people that really wanted to get rid of the LDP that got together. And Tommy Samurai, good to see you. In fact, just give me a quick moment, I've just got to adjust something here. Right, that should do it. So there are basically a bunch of malcontents from the LDP and the former Socialist Party. They're actually all types of people who are just there to get out the government. And what was remarkable about Yukio Hatoyama's prime ministership was not so much what he did himself. He was the leader, but he basically was head of a government that pulled together a lot of factions that really didn't get along and didn't see eye to eye, but recognized that there was a really unique opportunity, and they had to sort of hurry with trying to reform the bureaucracy and the things that would basically make the Japanese government not work. Basically, they knew that the bureaucracy would oppose the government and that this was part of the mechanism that kept the LDP in power. So they came in, they immediately set about things like regulatory reform. They set up a whole committee to look at cutting the power of government departments that the media and the bureaucracy sort of fought back vehemently against. And the whole idea was the party was just had to hold it together, not infight, and sort of execute the agenda. They had promised a clear manifesto, which was they were elected for. And kind of the iron fist holding everything together was Ichiro Ozawa, a power broker who used to be in the LDP, who formed his own party and then joined the DPJ. And he was kind of the person who was driving to make sure, and his view was that, whatever happens, the Democrats would be judged by their ability to carry out the manifesto that all factions, love it or hate it, agreed to in order to get elected. And for all the flaws of all the people in the DPJ, including this man here, everyone kind of, at least for the first year and a half, pretty much tried hell or high water. No matter what the attacks or criticism, they stuck to the manifesto, and it went pretty well until really this guy he went off the plot just a little bit. And when he did, he basically got off the plot where he started to feel sorry for the people of Okinawa and the base burden. And he suggested two things. First, he suggested that we'll reduce the base burden on Okinawa by moving the bases to other parts of Japan that should volunteer to share the burden more, so it's not all on Okinawa. And particularly when they started looking at Kagoshima for this, and Kagoshima said, no way, Jose, we don't want the problems that they've got. We don't want US bases up in our territories. And everyone said, no way. Then he told everybody, don't worry, I'll persuade the Americans that they can move their forces to Guam, to which he was told very strongly by Hillary Clinton, that's a terrible idea and you should resign. And that's what he did. He resigned. And when he resigned, it all fell apart. The next prime minister who took over was Naoto Kan, who everyone knows as the prime minister during, of course, the nuclear emergency. But when he got in, he decided it was time to... he was from the former Socialist Party of Japan, and he decided it was time to basically do a purge of all of the people associated with the Hatoyama administration and to reverse the manifesto promises that got them elected, and basically set about bloodletting and infighting. And he went on until he had to resign, and then Noda came and basically doubled down doing the same thing, doing exactly what the bureaucracy told him to do. And so the government failed. It's a long story, but basically the crack in the dam was from Yukio Hatoyama, not with bad intentions, just kind of being a little bit naive about how the East Asian security mechanism works, and how America sees the importance of its bases in Okinawa for the defense of Taiwan and South Korea and for America itself. And the idea that he could kind of idealistically, publicly be a bit, flowery and vague, making pretty big promises that he couldn't keep. Since then, before then, he's always been, people called him the space alien when he was prime minister. And he's kind of been up to it again. He's gone across and he does weird things. He says weird things sometimes, which make me kind of cringe. I still think he isn't as bad as Khan or Noda, which basically threw everything out when they became prime ministers. However, he recently, Hatoyama, former prime minister of Japan, visited China and his good friend Winnie the Pooh. And when he was over there, he recognized where he was and thought he would try to make friends by saying, this human rights law that America has passed is a terrible thing, and basically criticizing it, said that it's clearly America trying to interfere with the internal affairs of China. Um, for a start, setting aside Hong Kong's special status at least until 2047, I believe, the 50-year sort of interim period of two governments, or two countries, one system, or not two systems, one country. The idea that a former liberal Prime Minister of Japan would object to a law that's designed to monitor and protect the legal and human rights of people in Hong Kong, and that you'd be sort of appeasing towards a totalitarian country that doesn't do that, is a little bit, to me, it kind of shows, again, just he's kind of like a bit weird and a bit awkward and a bit embarrassing to have around. And I don't know what he was hoping to achieve with that. It seems like he was trying to become friends with, Xi Jinping, but that's really not the way to do it. I mean, it was a little bit awkward. Again, it's kind of as a person who believe in yourself, indeed, way beyond drinking this Kool-Aid. To me, this is kind of the problem. This is why Abe can basically have a flower viewing party with gangsters and pretty much admit to it, and deliberately destroying all the records associated with it. And people don't even really care because they are so put off remembering this guy being Prime Minister, which is a shame, because I really wish that, good governance in Japan depends on there being a strong, viable, alternate choice. And, they really screwed it up, although there was about 1.5 years that I considered that I was really optimistic, and I thought that this was the guy, this guy was doing what he had to do, and I was really impressed, but unfortunately, no. So, Lysander 45, good to see Lysander 45, as well as against Konto, and a few other people I saw came in here, told me somewhere I think I said hello to. But everyone else joining, good to see. It reminds you of Kuomintang politicians who go to the mainland and talk about how reunification is totally what the Taiwanese want. Yeah, it's actually a lot like that. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if Hatoyama wouldn't offer. Well, actually, you know what? You just triggered a whole bunch of thoughts. One, wouldn't be surprising if he was offering to give Okinawa back to China, because some people in China consider that Okinawa, like Taiwan, as a tribute-paying kingdom, was actually a vassal state, traditionally part of China. Although the same argument is made by a lot of nationalist Chinese towards Korea. I mean, basically, Okinawa is as much historically a part of China as Korea is, which a lot of people would say it's not. But from a security perspective as well, China's got a big interest in Okinawa because, of course, it kind of serves as a blocker for people in, it puts U.S. forces really close to Taiwan, which is a buffer against doing anything weird with, across the straits there. But, again, the fact that he kind of went on wanting to disarm Taiwan has had among the conspiracy theorists, albeit right-wing critics of him in the first place, thinking that he's the sort of person that would go over to China and take friendly huggy photos and condemn human rights to make China happy, which it looks like he's doing. So you're right, he probably is. I mean, of course, the DPJ is nothing like the Kuomintang, but maybe he is. I mean, I for one welcome our new overlords. What can we say? But I don't know. It's just I just get so disappointed when I remember what happened with him and how he continues to disappoint. On a lighter note, in Tokyo, trendy neighborhoods that have kind of lately been suffering under the yoke of development. There's actually, and I thought this was going to be like a whiny article by James Hadfield, and I kind of went through and saw the examples, and I was kind of like, well, yeah, I kind of agree. So someone who's been here for 21 years and actually very fond of some of the neighborhoods that are featured here. Let's go through the ones that are picked up. Worth a read anyway, this article in full detail. So has Shibuya gotten upmarket? Well, it kind of has. I mean, there have been more departments, there's been a lot more development, a lot more departments and whatever. I don't know that it's really necessarily less like that. That it's been sort of overdone, but yeah, it's well, it still is. So basically, from this one, Shibuya is still basically in good form. Shimo Kitazawa has kind of pointed out that yes, at one point it was actually listed one of the coolest neighborhoods in the world, which it was. I've at times in Japan tried to live as close as possible to Shimokitazawa, if not in Shimokitazawa. Great food, great bars, great live houses, great shopping. It's kind of a quasi-student kind of hipster town. Really love it, but yes, they did decide to knock down the station. It was necessary. The train station was a mess, but the expansion of the station overtook a bunch of the very cool neighborhoods around the station and kind of destroyed it, so that was a little bit of a shame. Hiko, you're busting my salaryman wake work sleep routine by telling me there's a world outside of work. Well, yes, that's right, and the only way to experience it is to sacrifice sleep. That's what you have to do. That's what I did. While you can take it, that's what you do. You take all that money you save up from work to go and enjoy it. Koenji kind of came on the on the scene as being a bit of a hipster neighborhood, certainly through the anti-nuclear movement and so on afterwards. I don't know that gentrification has really taken over either. It is another sort of a hipster town. It is a little bit surprisingly expensive for how kind of hipster it is. It is 2 stations out from Shinjuku. It's in a great location, but certainly it's where a lot of the student protest movements and protests sort of are, so that is kind of true. But yeah, Kiyosumi Shirakawa, I don't know it so well, but it's one of the kind of upmarket neighborhoods around Tokyo. But okay, so they're pointing out that, this is where Blue Bottle put their first location. And yeah, I don't know that it's building up that much. I don't actually know it that well. Nakameguro, I used to live near there, and yes, that was a very sleepy. Well, Nakameguro to me is improving. It was a place where it was mostly an old people's neighborhood when I first used to live near there. It did have a few really low-key, cool sort of jazzy bars and clubs and stuff, which I did used to like hanging out. It had a very Sangenjaya kind of vibe about it, kind of hidden in little pockets around the station. I used to DJ pretty regularly at a club, basically like a bar, more like a small bar that was near the station, or I'd book it up and hold events there with my friends and stuff. So it was cool. It wasn't well known, but it was really, really cool. I think it's gotten better known, particularly the fact that it's one of the best cherry blossom viewing areas in Tokyo, and I noticed the last couple of times I've been there, it's built up a little bit more. So it's still pretty cool. In fact, I would say it's probably become cooler over the years, or at least it's grabbed more attention. But Nakameguro is definitely a cool neighborhood. Akihabara, well, where to start with Akihabara? Akihabara, of course, the electric town there. The anime and electronics neighborhood. It's changed. So when I first got here, one of my hobbies when I first got to Japan, if you wanted to buy a new computer, you'd have to spend like $2,000 or $3,000. But if you were willing to learn how to build a computer from parts, you could build a pretty decent computer back in the day for $400 or $500, and that's what I like to do. And it was cool to go around the parts shops. I love talking with the staff in the shops. You go to a shop that did nothing but monitors, a shop that did nothing but graphics cards, and you could talk with the staff and they'd tell you everything about how to choose a graphics card. And it was cool, and it was kind of like it had a very underground thing about it. There was the main stretch, which did have some, the electronic shops that were on the main stretch, they were not Yodobashis and big cameras. They were not mainstream electronic shops. They were SoftMap, which would also buy and resell second-hand stuff, and shops like that. But SoftMap's become more mainstream. But it was in the back streets. There'd all be all these places that would be selling, dodgy sort of imported, electronics, pirated software, and boxes of new and used computer equipment. And it was it was very, very deep. And if you were into electronics and computers, it was the place that you would go to sort of shop around and learn stuff. This is the last place in the world I could imagine taking a girlfriend to, for example. It did have, of course, its dark sides even back then. It was and remains the sort of home of Japan has a lot of lolicon, either animated or really dodgy sort of pornography and stuff like that. And in those back streets, there were shops like that as well. And there were people who would go there for that. There were people who would go there for the computer stuff. There were people who would be, there were card collecting shops and sort of hardcore sort of hobby shops, model shops. It was basically pretty extremely otaku, like deep otaku sort of focused. And it was kind of a sort of a place where in any other part of Tokyo you wouldn't ever show that you were the sort of person who was in Akihabara, and you'd be very careful who you'd say that you go to Akihabara. other than, of course, if you're a tourist, a few of the big electronic shops around the station. Mr. Cordyceps, do I know about those shops? Yeah, I know about them. Well, one, because you could see them, but two, because I knew people, had Japanese friends who, that's the reason that they would go to Akihabara. I would go for the electronics, honestly. Animated stuff just doesn't do it for me. But I guess two things happened with Akihabara over the years that have really stood out. One, maybe three things, I'll say three things. One, that subgenre of maid-oriented sort of anime, pornography kind of genre, that sort of jumped out and became like associated with the main identity of the town. And to me, that one day you'd see a cafe where someone dressed as a maid, like handing out flyers, and the next time you go there and there's two. And lately I went to actually sell, to exchange an old camera to buy a new one. The main street was a gauntlet. Both sides of the street, just rows of women like dressed up in maid outfits, offering you. Well, some were cafes, and some seemed to be massage and quasi. In Japan, prostitution has many there's a broad spectrum, but basically variations of maid cafes of different sorts, cramming the whole street. And it was like, ooh, like at least back in the day, it wasn't like forced on you, and it wasn't like the whole thing, but it's really become really dominated by that. The other thing that's happened is that of course it's also gentrified. Now there's an enormous Yodobashi camera there. There are offices, big shiny offices that have come up on one side of the station, and a lot of more mainstream electronic shops. So there are restaurants there now, and there are a lot of people, of course, named like the AKB Cafe and stuff like that. It is a place that you now see people on dates, and you see women going to, and so on. And I mean, in some ways that's a good thing, but it's kind of opposed by that weird kind of maid cafe culture, which I find really kind of like off-putting and disturbing and annoying, frankly. And the computer shops that I used to like are still kind of there, but they're more buried away in the parts shops. Nowadays you can get computers as cheap or cheaper than you could buy them. Well, if you really want to get a really nice custom PC, that's still the place to go, except nowadays, rather than buy the parts and get a few electric shocks making it yourself, the people in the shops will make it for you for the price of the parts and sell it to you with the warranty, so it's actually pretty good. The third thing that's happened is that it's become known as a tourist destination. And again, when I came to Japan, there were like 200 or 300 foreign tourists a year coming to Japan. Nowadays there are 30-40 million coming per year, and it's just a sea of foreign tourists now when you go there as well, which is a little bit weird to be walking around there realizing, oh geez, no, I'm a tourist. But it is what it is. It's also a place worth checking out, but I don't know, it's definitely changed its character, and while it's kind of gone up market in some ways, it's gone kind of like it's veered off to the left in others, and it's lost the charm that for me was the charm of Akihabara in the first place, which was a bit of a shame. But yes, Nakano, the discerning geek. This is an interesting one. When I first got to Japan, the working holiday center was in, still might be there in Nakano, in Sunshine. Was it Sun City or something like that? Sun City Plaza. So I remember I went there a couple of times. In fact, that's where I got my part-time job in Kichijoji. I was living in Hachioji at the time. So Nakano is one of the first neighborhoods that I knew, and it's actually the first neighborhood that I lived in after I moved out of my girlfriend's house when I arrived in Japan. So a big fan of Nakano. And I think Nakano continues to be a cool town. It's actually a bigger town than Koenji or Shimokitazawa or anything like that. It's outside of the Yamanote line. But it's pretty convenient to Shinjuku. It's got pretty much everything, and of course it's got Nakano Broadway. That took me a while to realize that if you were into like collectibles and figurines and stuff like that, and manga and that sort of stuff, as if you're like an otaku collector, it's actually, I would say, better than Akihabara. And it took me a while to realize that as well. And it's getting nicer, and that's a good thing. Shin-Okubo is interesting. Again, this is the neighborhood that it's kind of the insert nationality. Well, it's basically Korean. I don't know if they associate it here with anything else. I don't think so. I guess that's interesting. It points out that lately you're more likely to see halal food and hear Vietnamese than Korean. That's interesting. And you know what? I did notice that the last time I was there. And that's something that I've missed. The wave of Vietnamese coming in has changed lately. But certainly when I first came to Japan, Shinjuku is the opposite side. If you walk away from Shinjuku Station towards Kabukicho and you hit Kabukicho, like the biggest red light district in Japan, both within Kabukicho and beyond, on the opposite side of Kabukicho, is Shinjuku. And again, when I first, I think I've told the story before about my first trip to Kabukicho, where some friends took me there, and I couldn't get in anywhere, and so I was kind of left walking around Kabukicho, where all my friends had gone into a kind of a brothel. I guess it was a fashion or a health or something that they went into, and they tried to take me in, and I couldn't get in, so I was kind of left walking around Kabukicho by myself. And I found the batting center, and I found some restaurants, and I found the Don Quixote, and I kind of found I actually discovered in my own kind of, hey, fuck you, Kabukicho kind of mood that I was feeling, that actually you could have quite a good time in Kabukicho not looking for sex. And actually I lived close enough to the place at the time. I ended up going back each weekend, and I became aware that the whole Korean community, or one of the largest Korean communities in Japan, lives in Shinjuku on the other side of Kabukicho, and they basically run all the restaurants and stuff in Kabukicho, and they made it really awesome. That, of course, the thing back in the day was, although that was a Korean neighborhood, they were kind of low-key about it. There wasn't, there were Korean signs here and there, but it wasn't like all over the place, and it was kind of, like I said, it was kind of low-key, but you could discover a lot of really cool stuff. I think what happened about 10 years ago was with the Korean, K-pop boom starting in Japan, the Korean drama boom and whatever, Korean culture became really popular, and I think they started emphasizing that, hey, this is where you can see Korea here in Tokyo, and lots of people go there just for that. I would go there for the food for that. But you're right, the last time I went to Shinjuku a couple of weeks ago, I had a banh mi, and it was okay. It was actually good, and I saw Vietnamese restaurants everywhere. And Vietnamese people really, there were a couple of Vietnamese restaurants I liked, I can think of 7 or 8 years ago, but they were hard to find, and they were awesome. But it really has only been about the last 5 years or 6 years that I've even really noticed that now Vietnamese people have gone from like 0 to like outnumbering Filipinos and Iranians. They're like probably the third, nearly the second biggest group of foreigners in Japan all of a sudden. And I don't know many immigrant Vietnamese actually, or where they gather. According to this, it's Shinjuku, so that would explain it. But yeah, I would say if you want to go and see a bit of a cosmopolitan Tokyo, definitely Shinjuku is a good neighborhood to go to. And it's good that it's less grungy than it used to be. And somewhere in East Tokyo, the Pioneer, Kinshicho is a bit of a grungy. Yeah, I mean, basically, East Tokyo, we've got like Shinkoiwa and Kinshicho, basically everything out towards the Skytree. I've been out there. I guess they've got big, like if you have a baby in Tokyo, you go to Akachan Honpo in Kinshicho, for example. I mean, they've got good shopping, and it's very kind of residential, but with huge department stores focused on lifestyle and stuff like that. There are good things in East Tokyo. I've lived in Nishikasai, which I loved. I love living in Nishikasai, but I don't know, generally speaking, East Tokyo is kind of, shitamachi, pardon me, and it's a little bit grungy, so yeah. Russian mafia turf. I was not aware of it being Russian mafia turf, but I don't really know Kinshicho very well, to tell you the truth. Other than it's just a little bit less green, it's a little bit more recent. People have recently moved to Tokyo. You sort of get a sense, it's kind of hard to describe, but you get a sense throughout the Shitamachi, but particularly in Kinshicho, of people who are, you don't see sort of happy looking people. You see people who have arrived and are struggling and trying to set up their lives in Tokyo. So, yeah, Bold Billets boy, I believe you. Certainly anyone would probably know better than me. Yeah, it's an interesting place to go every now and then, but I've lived in Kashiwa, which is north, but, has a similar sort of atmosphere. So I sort of know the vibe out there, and I've lived there, when I was going through my own early years of having arrived in Tokyo, but I'm kind of glad I don't live out there anymore, personally. It's good to go and see once now and again. And you know what? I've still never been up Skytree before, actually, so that's a thing. I should probably correct that situation. But yeah, kind of as a guide of Tokyo, trendy neighborhoods, it's a pretty good list. I would add to this list Iidabashi and Kagurazaka. Those are two, basically the same neighborhood, but that's pretty cool. Mr. Korichep, what's going on Adachi? Well, going on at Adachi. Well, in the latest news from Adachi, there's a news story, I didn't include it here today, but in the latest story from the ghetto, a 37-year-old was arrested A 37-year-old unemployed man was arrested by the police for calling up the neighboring kindergarten and screaming at them for 50 minutes that he was going to kill all the kids because they were waking him up in the middle of the day singing the national anthem. He's in jail now. I read this on Itai News blog where a number of people from the internet offered various life advice for this person. But I read the whole story, and then I was just about to flip away, and then I came back up to the top and I read the title again, and it said unemployed Adachi man arrested. And I was like, oh yes, stories from the ghetto. Yeah, probably you wouldn't get that in Kinshaw, at least you wouldn't. It shouldn't be that bad, but there you go. Ayase rocks. Ayase is nice, and actually there are lots of nice places in Adachi. I pick on Adachi, but holy hell, they've got terrible drivers, and they have stories like that, like all the time. Ayase is cool. I mean, yeah, like I said, I still live up Kyoto line, up in Joban line, up in the 10 worst neighborhoods of Tokyo. Someday I could probably do that. 10 worst neighborhoods in Tokyo. Well, I don't know. I mean, how do you do? I guess I'd define it by a train station. In terms of train stations that I would steer clear of, I know a couple of people, for example, who have lived in Uisunani. It's on the Yamanote line, which seems good, and the rents there are super cheap. However, the reason that it's cheap is that there's a lot of basically it's known as a love hotel and cheap sort of dirty prostitutes neighborhood. The people who have lived there, among the people who have lived there, and I believe that they're open about it, are Tikyo-san. So not throwing that in there for any reason, but I've known a woman who lived there, and actually who I used to work with, and she was saying it's a great neighborhood. There's great restaurants. It's Shamachi. It's got character. But one day she said that she had to move. There were like weirdos that were following her like to and from the station from her home apartment and stuff like that. She always had like perverts tracking her and stuff like that. It's just I'm sure it's a lovely place. I'm sure there are great people there. It is old Tokyo, so I'm sure it has character. But I've just heard too many things. I do not live in Uisunani. Adachi as a whole, there are great places in Adachi, and I feel like what would I pick out as a station? I mean, Nippori, I suppose, but actually I kind of like Nippori. I used to switch on Nippori going out to Kashiwa. I used to hang out at Kitasenju a lot as well. I wouldn't live there now, but it was kind of cool. I mean, Kisho and Koiwa are a little bit grungy. They have a bit of, they're known for having a bit of crime, for example. But there again, when I saw a hazard map of Tokyo, where I was living in Nishikasai, had higher crime than they did. Nishikasai was awesome. I wouldn't live in the neighborhoods around Nishikasai. Nishikasai has got lots of parks. It's really well planned out because it's all reclaimed land. It's in the most dangerous part of Tokyo in terms of like fires, earthquakes, flooding, and crime combined. It's got all of them, but it's a lovely neighborhood, and I live there. But the neighborhoods around, like Kasai itself, Minami Gyotoku, or Minami Sunamachi, which is beside Nishikasai, actually has the largest Indian community in Tokyo, and actually there's real upsides to that as well. There's fantastic food, although I wouldn't want to live around there. Shinkiba neighborhoods like that, they're just not very well provisioned. Trying to think. Kawasaki, Kawasaki's kind of grungy and does not have a great reputation. Asakusa, by the way, as well. I mean, it's a great place to go be a tourist, but again, I wouldn't want to live anywhere around there in that neighborhood that's got a similar reputation to Kawasaki. But yeah, I mean, there again, you've got Shinagawa, which is lovely, and you've got Yokohama, which is lovely on either side, and inland you've got all the new towns, which are also lovely. But Kawasaki is thanks for that, Mr. Cordy Chip, too much information. But Kawasaki is a little bit grungy. I used to live, I mean, again, some of the neighborhoods that people would put on the list, like say Saitama or Hachioji or Kashiwa or places I lived in them, and I actually don't mind them. The whole Chuo line, I don't think there are any really bad neighborhoods along that whole. I mean, Shiokubo would probably go on the list traditionally, just because of its proximity to Kabukicho and what's known about that. But there again, I mean, and you know what, even now, I mean, again, it's the reason it's a landing point for new immigrants is because it's affordable, and it's affordable because it's a bit grungy. But there again, I mean, if you've got lots of Vietnamese food, that would make me reconsider. But I must admit, if I could think it out some more, I might come up with some different ones, but yes, indeed. Anyway, that's kind of a take on trendy neighborhoods, and I think that's only the second article that I've covered today, so it looks like I am going to fill up the time. That's a good thing. You might recall I talked about the Hokuriku Shinkansens and how they got flooded because nobody moved them like 500 meters away where they wouldn't be parked beside a river, and tens of millions of dollars destroyed by letting the water just run over them like they had. Well, they figured it out. They're going to raise the parking area 10 meters. Particularly 10 meters, that's like 3 and a bit stories. Seems to me like kind of raising the flooded trains after the flooded. I don't know, a little bit late. And again, why don't they look at their procedures? To me, they should have. Let me Waito-san. Let me go and approve that comment. But yeah. Well, why not simply drive the trains up to higher pieces of track? I still think it's weird that they're insisting on parking them. And they always park trains on the cheapest land, and the cheapest land is always the land that's on floodplains beside rivers. You're not allowed to develop anything there. That's why it's cheap. That's why they park the trains there. Move the freaking trains. They're movable. That's the great thing about trains. They move. If there are buildings, they wouldn't be very useful as trains. I don't understand why. Sure, great that they're raising them, but they've already lost the money. It still seems a bit odd to me, but that's a postscript of that. There were 2 karoshi stories that made the news this week. Another one from Dentsu, Japan's monopoly advertising company, where they had a similar story a year ago, which is a bit disturbing. Another interesting one, I believe this was in Osaka, where, yes, an employee, apparently a 30-something employee, at Mitsubishi Electric, 30代の上司, they've arrested the superior employee for having caused the new employee to commit suicide. Apparently, this was not long after the person had joined. I guess if it was in August, the person, and they called them a shinyushain, a new joiner, probably had been there for about 4 months. But apparently, that in a tirade of abuse, the joshi, the superior, the manager, told the new hired employee to go and kill himself, and he said, "Okay, I will." And he left a note saying, "I did it because my boss told me to. Aren't I good?" And he did it. Obviously terrible. Again, you'd always ask, well, why don't people just quit? But it's pretty tough in these sort of situations. But again, one can only imagine what sort of stress people are under. And one thing that amazes me, and let me remind you of this, it's really common in Japan when people quit a company, for companies to say, we do not permit you to quit. You cannot leave without our permission. And people stay working and getting worked to death while they are while they are attempting to quit and being told that they may not. In no country in the world that I can name, well, no country in the world, there are totalitarian countries, I'm sure, where you are not actually able to quit. But in Japan, like any other developed country, employment is not the Hotel California. You leave a job when you give notice, which by law is 30 days. Under company rules, the company rules have a place you may be at, typically say 90 days, and you can negotiate. But if you can't agree, the law is on your side for 90-day notice, generally. Be careful of that. You generally want to do it in compliance with the company rules, because if you start a fight with the company, they could withhold your redundancy pay, which is pretty generous in Japan, so you don't want to mess with that too much. But generally speaking, most companies require 30 days notice, but you can do it in 30 days. Remember, Mr. Kurichep, that the salaries and everything are done on monthly, not weekly cycles in Japan. It is funny, by the way, as well, when employees are removed in Western companies, I think that is pretty common that they're told immediately to hand over their PC and they're escorted out of the building. It's pretty common in Japan, even when people quit, that people stay there like for a couple of months. And again, it's considered normal that they're responsible for the handover to the next hire that's replacing them and whatnot. But it's weird. Not only do they sometimes agree to be forced to stay in a place for 3 months before they start a new job. And by the way, this happened to me when I left Tokyo Marine. My boss told me that he would not allow me to quit because there was work coming up in the next few months. And I said, what are you talking about? Again, I was a lawyer at the time, and I was going to move to go to a law firm. So I again, I was although I respected my boss and I was keen to leave on good terms. When he said that to me, I was like, well, that just doesn't make sense. I'm giving you my notice. Don't you understand that? But a lot of people in that situation don't realize that, and they feel trapped. It's unusual for foreigners to be in this situation, but sometimes it happens. And just for anyone watching, I mean, you always know that if you ever get into a situation that a job is making you think about doing something like this, quit. I mean, believe me, the worst outcome of quitting is better than that. And remember as well that if you ever have trouble like with the boss and you're not getting the backup and support that you need from the general affairs or HR department of that company, you can always go and get free legal advice from the Labour Standards Bureau, which is a national government agency, but it's got offices all over the country. And they will also provide free legal advice. So if you want to check, does your contract, allow you to do this or not, or whatever, if you're having a dispute, you can actually often get free or very affordable legal advice to help sort these things out. It's a good starting point, especially if you need to find proper legal representation that can connect you. If the company is abusing, not following work standards, it's the place to go tell them anyway. Understand your rights there. Look up the Labour Standards Bureaus if you get into any trouble, and for God's sake, please don't do what this person did. But again, it's a problem in Japan that just so many people don't seem to know this, and they feel trapped, and they end up doing terrible things like this. Although good to see that, and kind of unusually that the senior in this case, the manager, has been turned into the police, I assume with the cooperation of the company, which is a good sign. NHK this week has been doing a number of specials which we've recorded, and my son has spent all weekend watching, being slightly terrified of what would happen if a shindo, if a shaking scale 7 earthquake directly hit the 23 wards of Tokyo. And remember, magnitude is the size of the bomb, which could be anywhere, and it could be deep or close or shallow or out to sea or inland or whatever. Shindo is the amount of shake that's felt. So this is talking about an earthquake with an epicenter in Tokyo that causes shaking of a Shindo 7, which is enough to basically shake down earthquake resilient buildings. It's the largest shake. There have only been 2 Shindo 7 quakes, I think, in my whole 21 years in Japan. One was in Miyagi during the Great East Japan earthquake, which actually that quake was epicenter was multiple places, but they were all way out to sea. But there were some parts inland which were basically Sendai, which was close enough to the epicenter that it got like a Shindo 7, which is pretty crazy. And you know what, Kobe I think was briefly a 7, but I wasn't here for Kobe, come think of it. Niigata was the next biggest one, but that was a 6+. So they're talking about a mega quake, which is bound to happen in Tokyo, because for those of you who don't know, Tokyo is actually kind of a weird place. It is at the intersection of 4 plates. There's a plate that comes down from Kamchatka, there's a Filipino plate, there's a North American plate, and there's the Asian plate, and they all crash into each other exactly in Tokyo. And Tokyo is funny because there's not actually a corner. What happens is there's actually like Tokyo is kind of like the Kamchatka plate, the one which points down from sort of Russia towards Japan. At the very bottom, at the pointy bit at the bottom, it's kind of broken off in a triangle shape, and so Tokyo is on a little plate of its own that sort of rattles and vibrates, and basically whenever any one of the other 4 plates move, Tokyo is basically vulnerable to moving. And the way the earthquakes work is basically like it's now understood to be something like a wound up rubber band sort of mechanism, where basically as these plates sort of move, they wind up and they trigger these boom, like releases every now and again, like a sometimes you get those kind of a wound up coil kind of mechanism. Basically it's how all of these plates work. They're either going up or down, and they're going like this and they're building up friction, they just snap. And Tokyo is doing that on 4 sides with 4 plates. So Tokyo is uniquely vulnerable to extreme earthquakes, and it is an absolute certainty. Basically, mega quakes like this happen in Tokyo every 76 years, almost like clockwork, because that's how these things sort of work. And the last one of these quakes was in 1923, which was about, well, so you count that, that's like 85, 90 years ago. We're past, due on the cycle. It's considered a 70% certainty that by 2030 that a mega quake is going to happen in Tokyo. And this was talking about, basically NHK decided to do, it was promoted as an educational simulation of what will happen when this happens in Tokyo. I watched it was multiple episodes, and it was honestly kind of a crappy drama. There were facts in there, but it was they were trying to maximize the emotional impact and trauma of it. But there were some interesting points to learn, which I learned from watching this. The first one is Mr. Korichev, quakes can happen anywhere, and Japan is awesome. Part of the reason Japan is awesome is because of these quakes. It shapes the mentality of the country. You should still come to Japan. But just bear in mind, this can happen anytime, and it can happen. Geez, I mean, this is the funny thing. I've had my family being worried about being earthquakes in Japan this whole time that I've been here. And the May, the March 13, the Great East Japan earthquake was a doozy. I mean, even though we were very far away from it, I suppose that the nuclear accident added an extra flavor of interest around it. But still, my sisters had been in London during the riots. My mum has been in Brisbane, where they've had severe flooding a number of times. My father was in Phuket when Phuket was hit by the tsunami. I'm doing fine, which isn't to say that Tokyo is where it's expected to happen, and it's going to happen. It's 100% certainty. But it's kind of funny. You can worry, and you can be anywhere else. My grandmother and my uncle in Christchurch both lost their houses in the earthquake in Christchurch, and everyone was worried about me the whole time here in Japan. What will happen when this happens in Tokyo? The first thing is that it was pointed out, interestingly, when we had the Great East Japan earthquake, it was a large quake, and it caused the trains to stop, but there was very, very little damage actually to Tokyo, which meant that although roads became blocked with people trying to go home and the train stopped running, basically everyone could safely walk all the way home, even if it took a long time, and most people were able to do it no problem. However, they pointed out that in the case of a direct quake, where there will be things like fires, floods, falling debris, damaged buildings everywhere, actually attempting to walk home will not only be dangerous for the person walking home, but it will actually also cause a bunch of secondary accidents, which will make it more troublesome and dangerous for rescue. People trying to rescue and whatever. It'll basically lead to a bunch of secondary accidents that they're emphasizing. And this is tough for me because I've got a kid. But they've said you have to trust that if your kid's at a school, leave them at the school. If you're at a work, stay at the work and go to the nearest evacuation center. Respond appropriately, but do not, like for Tokyo to have 23 million people trying to walk all over it when it's got, and then we're going through the scenarios of what will happen. The quakes will not only just result in quakes, causing buildings to collapse everywhere, which of course is going to happen, but the other thing is, of course, it will trigger fires, mainly from gas mains breaking and whatnot. And even in Sendai, or Kisenuma was the particular case that they had this. When you have fires in a large city, if there's winds, you get things like fire tornadoes are actually expected and known to happen. And this is indeed what happened after the quake in Tokyo in 1923, when Tokyo was mostly made out of wood. Was most people died not from the earthquake, but there was a firestorm, exactly the same as the World War II incendiary bombings of Tokyo. The number of fires all sort of merged together and became these sort of super fires, and because Tokyo gets a sort of a steady airflow from off the mountains, it basically turned into these sort of fire tornadoes that basically went, and most of the people who were killed, tens of thousands, were killed in the fires. However, it's not just the fires that you have to worry about, so don't worry about the fires, because the other problem is that most of Tokyo was built around rivers. The reason that Tokyo became a great big city was because before there were highways and roads, there were all of these rivers, and they were basically, these canals were able to substitute for trains. You could move goods around them. So Tokyo is mostly low-lying, and it's mostly, now all the rivers have been cemented up, and basically are now either canals or they're well sort of levied rivers. But all of these levees again will fail under the force of a direct earthquake. And there's a lot of neighborhoods, particularly Kiisho through Edogawa, those neighborhoods. There's actually the disaster poster, manual awareness, or the disaster awareness poster by Edogawa Ward in Tokyo says, don't be here. That's what it says. The manual for Edogawa just says it's just how to get out of Edogawa when shit hits the fan, because it's below sea level. The levees, and it will fail, it will flood, and it will catch fire and flood, and it's also on loose soil. So the earthquake will cause it to, the buildings there to suffer damage and sink before they get flooded or catch fire. I love Nishikasai. It's a great neighborhood. Edogawa is great, but they have pretty serious disaster manuals there that you should make yourself familiar with if you live there. They are great. They're very helpful. So I was talking about how do not try to walk home. Get to high ground, know where the evacuation zones are. Another interesting point as well, when the levees fail, at the moment there is a plan that will be complete in 2027 to prevent flooding in the subway system. But when the Edogawa levees fail, they will cause flooding of the subway stations, which will cause the entire subway network to become submerged. Which again, you don't want to be on a train when that happens. And they were pointing out that the subways are going to become unsafe really fast unless they sort that particular thing out. So yeah, Tokyo is really going to catch it pretty bad when it happens. It was remarkable that we had such a large earthquake during the Great East Japan earthquake, and there was basically no damage in Tokyo. There was one building in Kunacha that was kind of old and badly designed that did have an internal collapse and people did die. I think about 20 people actually, and there was a shopping mall which had in sort of eastern Tokyo that had one of the escalators sort of disconnect from the floor above and fall down and kill some people, and I believe a car park where a car ramp collapsed as well. But other than that, Tokyo actually was amazingly resilient given the size of the shake. But Tokyo, it will, of course, 100% experience a quake like this, and these are the things that current government simulations predict will happen. The prediction, according to that, is that there will be 1.8 million people unable to return home. And again, based on different scenarios, and it will be pretty bad anyway. And I don't know what you'd do with the refugees from Tokyo, where you'd even send them to, or how you'd send them out. But that is the thing that will happen. Of course, the other thing that will happen is Mount Fuji will erupt. Fortunately, Mount Fuji only erupts about once every 250 years, although it does so pretty regularly. And of course, the problem is the last time that Mount Fuji erupted was in 1770. And when it did, Tokyo Tokyo, like main downtown Tokyo, it got about 5 centimeters of ash. The thing is, it's like concrete. Especially when it gets wet, it is quite heavy. If you're like in Okinawa, not Okinawa. If you're in Yokohama, that can be enough. You only need like 30 centimeters of ash, and it can put enough stress on wooden buildings to make them collapse. Tokyo also would suffer pretty badly from Mount Fuji eruption, which again is currently due to happen. And actually, after the Great East Japan earthquake, it did start to show activity, but it sort of calmed down again. But that's another thing that could happen. In fact, who knows? The earthquake in Tokyo could cause Mount Fuji to erupt, and then you get both at the same time. It'd make for a good movie. But this is just part of living in Japan. Natural disasters are a 100% certainty. If you're in Japan, and take those disaster manuals, think about what you are going to do. In these situations, because it will happen. It won't not just Tokyo, anywhere in Japan, anywhere in New Zealand, anywhere in California, anywhere in the world, this can happen. I remember there was an earthquake in Sydney like 20 years ago, which no one expected to happen, and there was a gymnasium that collapsed. These things can happen in places that you don't even expect. But yes, well, Waito-san, the Mad Max thing, this is something that this drama which NHK was putting out was saying will happen. So there you go. Final one, I think this is just a bit of a fluff piece. It's talking about, there was a lawyer who came in and suggested that it may be possible for people to bring constitutional claims, the idea that onsen turning away people with tattoos, and suggested that a practical solution is that more tattoo onsen places offer bandages to help people cover up tattoos in the same way that people cover up surgical wounds and burns and whatnot. However, the responses from the internet were saying that basically the tattoo ban is a ban on Yakuza. It's not that Japan hates foreigners' tattoo culture, we just hate the Yakuza. Stop trying to dilute Japanese culture. If someone with a tattoo can go to a private bath, they don't have to go to a public bath. Tattoos are being a sign of a criminal, Yakuza, or idiot is super helpful. I say we keep the system as is. Rather than us being understanding to them, they should be understanding to us. Well, we are the world, we are the children. There are 30 million foreigners coming to Japan, and the Japanese government wants them to come. So yes, it's kind of interesting to see the debate. But that is pretty much it. Tiwaiwai has to go. I have to go too. We're coming up on an hour. I might play an outro tune. Should I play an outro tune, or should I just call it the night? I might play an outro tune. I don't have anything in mind. It went quite well last time, but let me do that. Someone give me a genre. Boom. Yes, please, says believe in yourself. So let me hook this up. Boom, 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 boom. Give me a genre. House, techno. Boom, 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 boom. Funky. Okay. Let's see. Electro funk in D minor. Well, I can probably do D minor with this. I don't know how well I could do electro funk. What's an electro funk track I could think of as a reference? Okay. Let's just make sure I do have that saved, so let's do a new one. Live scene, Quake, music. Let's just see if I can get this to display. Maybe I can't. Oh, there it is. Look at that. Booyah. It's a bit dark. Why is that dark? Well, it's better than nothing. Ah, I know why. I think I've got the... Oh. Hang on a sec. Okay. I don't think I can get that brighter for some reason, which is annoying, but anyway, let's do this. So electrofunk in D minor, another C sharp, which is D minor, I believe. Let's make it Alia. Let's make it about 110. What kind of drum beat do we want? That is weird. Why is that screen dark? I've got it in dimming mode. I don't know how I did that. Anyway.
show. Thanks for joining. That was fun. That actually worked out quite well. I'll see you guys later. Have a good week. Back in the same bat time, same bat channel next week. Boom. Peace. Cut out too fast. Anyway, see you later. Have a good one, everyone. Remember to like if you liked, and peace. Good to see you check out. Thanks for the